Welcome to Designing AI-driven Personalized and Adaptive Learning Environments course. In this week, that is the first week of this course, we will talk about what is learning, why we need personalized adaptive learning. Then we'll discuss the course outline and the plans we plan to do in this 12 weeks course. So instead of starting directly with what is personalized adaptive learning and everything, I invited our scholar, Dr. Vishwas Bade. Vishwas is researching on how SSMR, that is socially shared metacognitive regulation, is helping or impacting the collaborative learning processes. So I invited him to explain the basic learning theories which is needed for this course. Initially, we start with what is learning, because before we talk about why we need to personalize learning, we'll talk about what is learning. To explain what is learning, I would request Vishwas to explain what is learning.
Yeah. So thank you very much, sir, for inviting me to discuss this topic. And namaste everyone, I am Vishwas. We will discuss with very core topic, which is what is learning. So we all think we know what is learning until someone asks us to define it, right? So if we want to define a learning, then it can be like a learning is relatively permanent change in behavior of individual or an behavioral potential of that individual that results from experience and cannot be attributed to the temporary body states such as illness, fatigue or drug. So this is a standard definition given by Schul in 1986 in his standard and seminal work about the learning. So what are the key elements of this definition? First one, Schul talks about a relatively permanent change in behavior, which is not fleeting in the behavior, we can say. Then second point is change in the behavior or a capacity, which is potential. For example, if someone knows something how to do but still not yet demonstrated, still it can be considered as a learning. So being able to do. Third point is rooted in experience and practice, that can also be counted as a learning. So later we will look at this definition in different dimension of this definition whenever required further in this course.
Thanks, Vishwas. I think it seems, as you mentioned, it's not that the student is not able to even explain, but the student is able to do the process also kind of learning.
Yeah.
Then my question would be, what is not learning? Because we will be doing a lot of activities in our day to day, and we are good to that, and we will be able to do that without any issues. But we may feel that we are not learning. So I want to know what is not learning, because it seems every activity we do in the day to day seems to be learning. Can you tell us what is not learning?
Yeah, this is very interesting question, sir. We'll look at it. So just we saw that what is learning and what is the core of that. Now we'll see what is not learning, or in the literature what they are considering. They means what learning researchers are considering, not the learning components per se. So here we see that reading a Wikipedia article not necessarily always becomes a learning. Okay, why? Because may not produce lasting change in the behavior. When we say behavior, it is reproducing whatever we have learned in the past, reproducing through our actions, through our say knowledge components, like that. So second point is recognizing something in the moment can be a learning. So answer is no. So it is a temporary and no durable change is observed from that. Yeah. Third component is a performance improvement due to rest. So this was the point I was mentioning when we were on the definition. So temporary biological change in the state or temporary change in physical state. So for example, one person was working on something and he or she was tired and took some rest, and again after taking say a few hours of rest started doing the same work and producing good results. So can that be considered as a learning? So the answer in the literature is no. because it is due to the biological recovery and not the experience which that person has gained through the learning processes. So it is also not learning. Then last point, which is very important. So in some cases, knowing a skill but not yet demonstrating it. For example, knowing the drawing, and that is a part of core learning but not got the opportunity to demonstrate it at a fullest level. So this can be a learning. This is considered as a learning. So it actually shows change in the capacity even if not yet expressed. So that person in that moment may demonstrate that, and it is present in their knowledge structure. So it is also called as the learning for that person. So learning, in summary, is a durable internal change regardless of whether it has yet been expressed in the behavior or not. So there is a high chance in the future that that person will demonstrate if that person needs to demonstrate that skill. So that is considered as a learning.
Okay, interesting. So if I understand correctly, if a person learns by watching YouTube videos, but is not practicing it, it's just simply scrolling, is not learning, is momentarily getting some information, but it's not long lasting.
Yeah, it is just consuming, but we cannot say through the behavior that whether that person is learning or not.
But as same person watching a specific set of videos, say to know about how to write a research article, or to know about a particular statistics, but he understood some concepts, but he is not really expressing it.
Yeah.
He might express it when exams or when the need arises, but by watching that video and specific topic, he's able to understand that particular new knowledge is occurred. Then is it learning?
Yeah, it is considered as a learning, as the last point. Means that person has got the skills in a structured way.
Got it. Okay, thank you. So I would like to explain before we jump into what is personalized adaptive. I would like to explain what is computer-based learning environment according to the research. Computer-based learning environments are interactive learning systems in which learner can manipulate objects, in the sense a computer-based learning environments or mobile-based learning environments where it is designed in a web-based or a standalone system like a simulator. It is interactive object where learner can interact and manipulate the object. Then they can try some hypothesis. Then they can feedback is coming and solve possible in the CBLE, which may not be do possible in the classrooms individually. So in a CBLE, I can interact some object, I interact with it, I attempt some question and answers, I get a feedback. It's possible individually. In a classroom, it may not be possible. So these are called a CBLE, computer-based learning environments. For example, if you just summarize what is CBLE, CBLE is mostly interactive and responsive. The students can interact with the thing. Students can interact with any other material too, but CBLE is a computer-based system where they can interact, and it is learner-centered mostly because learner self-drives what to learn next, and learner decides when to learn and everything. And it's not learner simply reading the task. Instead, learner is actually constructing something in computer-based learning environment. The reception is kind of where the learner is scrolling to the YouTube videos. Those are kind of receptions, and it's flexible based on the learner space. The learner's path is different. Learner can start whenever they want. That's why it's kind of flexible in terms of learner's personalized system. And sometimes the CBLE includes simulations, hypermedia, video, text, and everything. Also, it's an adaptive system. So the CBLE can detect the learner's performance and preferences, can provide its own remedial content or the adaptive content. So if I want to summarize how this CBLE is different from a traditional classroom, in a traditional classroom, the teacher controls the pace and sequence, that is which content to teach. For the class of 30, the teacher teaches same topic, and teacher waits for all the 30 students to understand, then moves to next topic. Wherever in the CBLE, since it is personalized, the learner controls their own path, navigation and everything. And the content is uniform in the classroom because the teacher cannot have individual content for each learner in the classroom. Whereas in CBLE, its whole idea is to personalization, personalizing content based on the student's performance. If they need more prior knowledge, we provide that. And CBLE systems actually infers the learner's cognition by asking set of questions like MCQ questions, the time they take in, the way they behave in the system, then try to give a feedback. Wherever teacher, it's although it's not easy, but the experienced teacher will look at all the 30 students in the classroom. They're able to quickly guess what's happening. A student will need some detailed content, all these things. But the teacher is the one who's monitoring, and the feeling, the interaction with the teacher student is very natural. But in a CBLE, the social dimension is not there, but we can define it. We can make collaboration possible in CBLE. So those are the real differences between traditional and CBLE classrooms. So within this, given the open-ended learning environments is increased freedom does not automatically produce increased learning. That's a comment saying that giving more freedom to learner does not mean they can learn better, right? So within all this knowledge of traditional classroom to CBLE, what are you defined as learning before? You learning as they have to, they are even consuming knowledge, they're constructing knowledge, even though they are not expressing, is kind of learning. Whereas in CBLE, it is not that they're passively learning, they should also express. Given all these things, can you tell us how learning theories would be applicable for CBLE?
Yeah, definitely, sir. So yeah, this is very interesting point, sir. Building upon the thing which we discussed previously, which is what is learning. So there are various learning theories, and we'll see how those learning theories are positioned and how those learning theories are linked with CBLE. Okay, so how traditional learning theories are relevant in the context of CBLE? I would say these theories are very classic, and these are generic in nature, and it can be linked up with, or it can be relevant for different various type of learnings happening in our day-to-day life. So we'll see different learning theories. So this is a table containing some core classic learning theories from 1930s, I would say. So first one is behaviorism. It is from Skinner's and Watson's work. So the core idea is they are considering learning, which is a change in observable behavior via reinforcement. Okay. So the next theory is constructivism. Constructivism is from the work of Piaget in 1950s. So the core idea of that constructivism theory about learning is learners actively build knowledge from the experiences. So when they say experiences, first they acquire knowledge, and then after acquiring the knowledge, they construct the knowledge on the priorly acquired knowledge. So it is getting that mental schema refined in the knowledge evolution process, we can say. So you can see the core ideas of those learning, which is given in the last column. We will definitely look at the definitions of those learning theories, but we'll start with some layman's understanding about those learning theories. Okay, so just to make it more relevant and simple to understand, we will look at core ideas of those learning theories first. So the next learning theory is constructionism. One can say constructivism and constructionism look similar because learning deepened by constructing shareable artifact may look like a subset of constructivism. So in a way we can say that on a personal level it looks similar, and yes, it can be considered as a subset of constructivism in some of the context. So it is work of Papert in 1980s, and it is mostly relevant with the social construction of knowledge and building some objects and refining that mental schema and building a new knowledge also using constructing process. So here the physical objects are involved in constructionism, which is social in nature and have some tangible existence, but it is not necessary in the constructivism. So that is the fundamental difference. Last learning theory, which is as sir said, that in CBLE also it is possible to facilitate the social learning through say discussion forums or peer evaluation or something like that. So social learning theory is from the work of Lev Vygotsky and Bandura in 1970s mostly. So as per them, learning is a social, contextual and observational. So observational have two dimensions. One, we can actually show our behavior which others can observe, and we can actually observe others' behavior. So it is a two-way process, we can say. Now we will look at those theories in detail with the definition, core principle, and which we have seen already in detail, but in the context of CBLE, how it is linked up, we'll see that, as sir mentioned previously. So behaviorism, as we can see, the definition is given from the literature. The behaviorism is the behavior of organisms is shaped by its consequences. Reinforced behaviors are repeated, punished or unreinforced behaviors are extinguished. It is given in the literature. So what are the key principles of this definition? About learning, they say change in observational behavior. So one can understand that behaviorism deals with the learning through the behavioral indicators of that learner only. Okay, it has nothing to do with the internal mental processes which are going on in the learner's mind, we can say. It is coming through the learner's observable behavior. Second component is driven by stimulus, then response and reinforcement. So there has to be some trigger. To that trigger, which is considered as a stimulus, and then response of that learner will come. On the basis of that response, the learning setting can decide whether to reinforce that behavior or to push that behavior which is not desired in nature, push it down. Okay. Next core principle or component of this learning theory is internal mental states are not the focus of that, as I mentioned in the first bullet point. So that was the main key principles of this learning theory, which is quite an old learning theory. There are many famous experiments conducted by B.F. Skinner in US universities to kind of automating learning using learning machines. So in CBLE, immediate feedback, scoring, badges, adaptive drill and practice or progress bars given on the dashboard may look like they are features of behaviorism. So we can consider it as, in some of the context, people get it as a stimulus, say for example looking at the progress bar and giving their desired response or undesired response, and on the basis of that system can reinforce or decide to push it down. So these kind of things can be considered are linked with the behaviorism learning theory. So the limitation of this theory is it does not account for internal cognitive processes or the role of prior knowledge in the learning process. So we'll look at next learning theory, which is constructivism by Piaget in 1952. What Piaget say we'll see first, and some of the commentaries on the Piaget's work by other researchers. They are also renowned researcher in the learning sciences. So the definition says that the child's mind is not a blank slate. Each new idea must be assimilated into existing cognitive structures. These are the comments or kind of classic work which is considered in some of the context as a definition by Piaget. So Piaget is saying that there is some existing knowledge structure. On the basis of that, new knowledge has to be built. The commentary says, which is in line with the definition, is knowledge is not passively received either through the senses or by ways of communication, but is actively built up by the cognitively engaging with subject, So this comment is highly aligned with the definition, which actually enhances the meaning of the definition, that there should be a prior knowledge structure which is may be acquired through by looking at the social surrounding around us or by listening some sounds. I am talking in the context of child's learning. Then new knowledge is constructed on the basis of that. So this is the basic premise of the constructivism learning theory. Core principles of this learning theory is learners actively construct knowledge, or learners actively construct new knowledge on the basis of prior knowledge, and new learning must connect with the prior knowledge or the mental schemas which are present in the learner's mental model. So understanding is a personal and varies across learners on the basis of, say, prior knowledge, their capabilities and skills. And there are many skills like metacognitive skills and information processing skills, etc. So in CBLE, as we saw how behaviorism was linked, we can say the constructivism is also linked in CBLE through, say, discovery learning trajectories. So there are multiple learning trajectories in CBLE, and learners can actually take different trajectories on the basis of their own liking, we can say, or their own inclination towards the learning. This can be a constructivist approach or constructivism, picture of constructivism in CBLE. The next one is problem based task. On the basis of prior knowledge, they choose problems, then they try to solve that problem. Mostly in context of ill structured problem, there are many ways to solve that problem. This can be also one representation of constructivism in the CBLE. Then concept mapping tools, many concept mapping tools, for example mind maps, concept maps, etc. They are free and open source. People uses that to create mind maps and different representation of their knowledge structures. So knowledge building platforms like KB, these also the platform which shows the constructivism in action, we can say. So the implication for design is some content will be understood differently by different learners, hence personalization becomes more necessary and more important. So this is main core idea why we are looking at those learning theories and how it is linked up with the CBLE. Yeah. So next learning theory is constructionism. Constructionism, as we looked at the summary slide, that it involves something like building by their hands and involving the learning by implementing something and in a physical scenario. So definition says, or the seminal work says, that the most fertile ground for the growth of constructive thinking is when the learner is consciously engaged in a constructing a public entity, whether it's sandcastle, a machine, a computer program, or a theory. So here Papert in 1980s tried touching all the dimensions of constructing. Say if we see that sandcastle machine have some physical existence, but Papert again traveled to the virtual world and again take that constructing process and try to make that constructionism theory relevant in the space of virtual area also by touching to the computer program and theory. So this is very important theory, and again it gives meaning to the learning by looking at, say, internal learning processes, how people are really constructing those things, because these things were missing in first learning theory we saw, which is behaviorism. It is actually directly observable, it is directly inferred through the observable behavior of that learner. But this theory goes little bit far than that and look at the internal mental processes of that learner. This is the beauty of this is the beauty of diverse learning theories we have. So constructionism, there are again core principles. First one is extension of constructivism. It is considered as, because learning is deepened by making something shareable which is public in nature. So Papert have used this word in the definition, which is public entity. So public here holds the meaning from learning sciences literature, which is social in nature. So other individuals also have access to that by maybe looking at it, by maybe contributing to the building process, etc. But that entity is built in a public domain or socially shared domain, not to make it more complex. Okay. Next point is, which is core principle, which is artifact creation externalizes and consolidates internal knowledge. This is very important point, and it is actually showing the beauty of this theory, that in order to understand the learning of that learner in detail, one has to look at the mental processes and not only the behavior. So this artifact is actually the picture or the copy, whatever that learner is thinking in his or her own mind, it is a copy of that we can consider, and it is actually way beyond the learning behavior itself. So this was the second important principle, which is artifact creation externalizes and consolidates internal knowledge of the learner. In the context of CBLE, programming environment such as Scratch actually nudges or facilitate that externalization process of that learning for the learner. So learner is provided with a multiple option to build or to create something with the hand, and this is a virtual entity, but it can be built in a public domain. So this constructionism is, we can say, is in action when someone is building the program with the help of Scratch, then maker platforms and different collaborative problem solving platforms where the collaborative resources are provided and they build something which is relevant for the problem. Then student created digital artifacts, maybe outcome of that collaborative problem solving, say they come up with some website or something like that. So this is the relevance of that constructionism theory in CBLE. So the key distinction from constructivism is, constructivism talks about build knowledge in the mind, and the constructionism talks about build knowledge through object in the world which is public in nature. So this is the main difference between these two theories. We are moving towards last learning theory, which is social learning theories. So we'll look at work by Lev Vygotsky in 70s and Bandura in 70s again. So the Vygotsky talk about social learning is every function in the child's cultural development appears twice, first on the social level and later on the individual level. So they are saying that child learn by looking at others, by observing, and then at individual level it start assimilating, that assimilation of that learning starts, then maybe mimicking, then replication, and then we start observing that child, that oh, that child is actually saying something for the first time. But before saying something that first time, it has happened in that child's mind by observing others. So that plane Vygotsky tried capturing in the social learning theory. So learning is inherently social before it becomes individual. This was the baseline of the social learning theory given by Vygotsky. Then again new concepts are laid down, which is zone of proximal development. This term itself is self-explanatory and it is very beautiful theory. Again, the distance between what learner can do independently and what learner and what they can do with the guidance. Guidance here is a support or help we can provide. In the learning sciences, that guidance or help is called as a scaffold. So learning happens best in this zone, which is called as zone of proximal development. But in what way? With the help of guidance or scaffold or support. And who will provide that support or guidance? That person or that entity is called as more knowledgeable other, which is support for that learner. So this is theory of zone of proximal development. So after this, about the social learning, Bandura said in 70s that learning would be exceedingly laborious, and he also says that if people had to rely solely on the effect of their own actions to inform them what to do, like once the action is done and the learner or the person is actually in future acting on the feedback which is coming from others, then it will become more tedious. So fortunately, most human behavior is learned observationally through modeling. So here Bandura is actually highlighting that hidden process which is in social learning, which happens implicitly and not explicitly. And if it is explicit, then it would become very difficult and laborious, Bandura says. So that process gives chance to model human behavior or human learning in future. Hence that process is very implicit. Hence Bandura says that most human behavior is learned observationally in bracket, implicitly, indirectly through modeling. So this is very beautiful quote by Bandura. So in CBLE, collaborative task, peer review, as I mentioned, discussion forums, modeling videos, worked examples, AI tutor, as sir mentioned, are all considered as more knowledgeable others in that zone of proximal development, which can actually handhold the learner and take that learner ahead in the learning with the help of social learning theory. When we say social learning, it doesn't always mean there are many humans in the learning process. It can be a scaffold through the technology, which is AI tutors in some case.
Thank you, Vishwas. I think thank you for going through all the four learning theories. To summarize, if I can summarize all four learning theories in the CBLD, I feel it's that each learning theory complement each other. For example, to start with behaviorism, which tells that how to reinforcement shapes the behavior. That we are observing the learning by the behavior, and how this reinforcing that particular behavior by giving awards or the progress bar shapes the learning. Then to make the students to develop their own knowledge, construct their own knowledge, by using the prior shapes from constructivism. Then we move to the constructivism. There we are talked about developing the program in public entity. The student can create a program from scratch, developing a concept map which is shareable to others. I think those kind of task design is being used in the computer-based learning environments. So we have a content sequencing because we need a prior knowledge based on constructionism. Then we have this, the developing a task is also being used. And social learning, as you mentioned in the previous slide, I think the knowledgeable other, or in the ZPD, the expert, it's called the student talking now is student to experts, moving to the pushing their boundary from the comfort zone to the medium zone. That's the zone. I think we'll talk about this in detail in the later weeks. In the ZPD, I think in the social learning, that is in CBLE, the discussion forum can be the gives a base for the social learning. But in the latest context, due to advancement of Gen AI, I think Gen AI makes a narrative interaction and conversation. We would consider that Gen AI also can be the collaborator with the learner. That's also possible.
Yeah.
So I think we consider well-designed computer-based learning environments draws design principles from all these four theories, and that would make the students learning better. So thank you.